We've all thought it, right? If the world ended today and the undead hordes filled the streets, where could we find safety? How could we survive? Well, the first place that comes to the minds of many is something just like this. A sealed bunker hiding a secret base beneath the ground, stocked with resources, crafting materials, and sustenance to keep you alive in the apocalypse. But I don't have any of that. All I have is a desolate, abandoned bunker, and that is where our story begins. As I awoke in this new frontier and rummaged through the drawers and shelves of this small hole in the ground, I first had to set forth a key goal to accomplish before this journey was done. And of course, ignoring the most blindingly obvious goal of not dying, my goal for this adventure was to convert this bunker into a home stocked with everything I'd need to survive. That wasn't as simple as you might think, however. Finding weapons, food, water, tools, power, meds, and a vehicle, and doing all of that while avoiding the ever-present clutches of death was quite the task. So I had plenty of items to check off before we could call it a successful day out. After making my way through the cupboards inside the bunker and acquiring a few essentials, namely a shovel with which I could defend myself, I exited the safe confines of this humble home and laid eyes on the surrounding forest. Opening my map for the first time, I was able to uncover the secrets of my surrounds. Initially, in most Project Zomboid adventures, you're gonna need a focus on food and tools. Without either of those, you would be pretty much screwed. Unfortunately, outside the boundaries of this forest were a number of buildings. Now, full transparency, these could be burnt down hotels, morgues, infested hospitals, or worse, strip clubs. That is to say, I was completely unfamiliar with this area, so I just headed to the building closest to me. As I escaped the tree-filled landscape of my forest surrounding my home, I crossed a nearby road and laid eyes on my first rotting friends. Knowing that tools may be hard to come by, I opted to take care of them the old-fashioned way. A quick shove with these giant, thick, broad shoulders was often all it took. So simple I couldn't help but express a thoroughly masculine grunt. This first building appeared to be some kind of diner. I first checked the vehicles in front of it. Each vehicle was in and of itself a mystery box. You could only help to pull the elite legendary drop, the functional car with gas and a key. But this time, no gas to be found. Inside the building was, as to be expected, a clean diner, abandoned at the beginning of the apocalypse. The first thing I found was an amazing get, a supermarket cart, which would make it infinitely easier to lug stuff back and forth to the bunker, given I didn't have a car. Well, not yet, at least. Luckily, there was a decent starting supply of food within the diner, but given that my bunker didn't even have a fridge at this point, there'd be no use lugging this all back since it would just rot before I'd even get to use it. Instead, I took some non-perishables and some wine. This adventure would be a lonely one. Perhaps in this silent, lonely world, I could seek peace in the comforting embrace of alcoholism. For legal reasons, I'd like to state that alcoholism is not an escape and I don't endorse day drinking. Since I'd need a steady supply of water, I emptied out a separate wine bottle and filled it to the brim. The water was running for now, but it certainly wouldn't last forever. Before I left the diner, I cooked myself a pork chop for some travel rations and headed on to the next building. This next lot was an exciting one. In any longer Zomboid run, you'll need access to some key essentials nearby your base location, and this gas pump was one of those essentials. Without gas, I wouldn't be able to obtain long-term power, which was part of my goal for the bunker. And as if it wasn't obvious, gas also allowed me to reliably fill a vehicle, meaning now all I'd need was to find a vehicle with a key. With that in mind, I checked the first two vehicles I'd found to see if they had a key in the ignition or a key in any of the seats or glove box, but had no luck with either one. So no luck on the key so far, but I mean, I'll check this gas station and then I'll keep looking around. I think we'll find one eventually, hopefully. I scavenged through the gas station to find any key food stocks to throw into the supermarket cart, before deciding it was time to head back to the bunker with my first haul. Given the nature of zombie heat maps in this new update, so far we had been very fortunate. Nowadays, you could find hordes of hundreds of undead just about anywhere, so only having seen 2 or 3 in my first forays outside the forest was pretty lucky. On my way back home, I took the opportunity to check a few nearby cars to see if they had keys. All right, and we have a key in ignition. Okay, now we're cooking with gas. Pun not intended, but still Very funny to me. And across the road, fortunately enough, I had my first successful find. As with all looting runs, you have to know when enough is enough. My instincts were saying any longer would be a little dangerous. So with my shopping cart in tow, I headed back through the trees. A successful first day accomplished. So far, looking at my goals, I'd acquired a decent supply of food, and the vehicle I'd found outside the upper car park was a work in progress. But this work in progress was still progress. One can only achieve a larger goal by completing the smaller goals it is comprised of. If only I was as good at surviving as I was at yapping. I spent some time reorganizing the interior of the bunker. It was at best a very small space to work with, and as you'll come to see, I would need every tile I could free up for storage, so the proverbial game of Tetris was an exceptionally important one. After an average night's sleep, I headed back to the upper car park, taking stock of the buildings surrounding me and clearing out any friendly neighborhood zombie mans. Since we're already pretty much aware of our surroundings, I will clear the proverbial fog of war and unpack my location for you. In this larger area, I had some extremely interesting buildings. A doctor's office, a food market, and a clothing store. Would you believe me if I told you the building above was far, far more interesting than all three? While fending off the undead, I checked the first door to the doctor's office with no success. Without wanting to draw the attention of every zombie in the area, I decided to not break down a window just yet, and instead headed to the clothing store. There was nothing game-changing inside, but I did find a cowboy hat, which would give me a 300% buff to every stat in the game. After swapping out for some fashionable new threads, young people still call clothes threads. Am I old? I'm old, aren't I? Maybe that's not even an old thing and it's just a me thing. I'm getting distracted. I continued squashing a few undead heads before heading upwards, where I can now reveal the identity of the mystery building, an army surplus store. Well, if it isn't the freaking motherlode. At this point, it was safe to say that this was effectively an amazing starting location, having weapons, food, clothing, medical supplies, and a gas station in close proximity was a proverbial gold mine. It wasn't everything I'd need to accomplish my goal, but it was a hell of a dent. Opting for a safety first approach, I first made sure all the nearest zombies were dealt with. Once that was out of the way, I funneled through every shelf, finding new clothes, vests, some body armor, some weapons like hunting knives, jerry cans, the motherlode. But no guns just yet. They were sealed within an impenetrable fortress. There was simply no way an average person could overcome these advanced defenses. Okay, there was a way. But since I was running low on space anyway, I'd come back to this. It's like a mystery box opening. You'll have to wait and see whether I get the god pack. Instead, having now cleared the surrounding area, I headed back to the first building, the doctor's office, and smashed the window. Since I hadn't made an appointment, the doctor was at best displeased, so I knocked some sense into them. Wait, that was a patient. It's an honest mistake. Here's the doctor. After unlocking the door at the front, I brought my cart inside and loaded it to the brim with every medical supply I could find. Given that the cart was quite full, it was time for a trip back home, promising to return for my mystery box opening the next day. Already, I was kind of running into storage space problems, but frankly, if it got that bad, I'd just throw it on the floor. But before I deal with my inner demons, I want to talk about today's sponsor, Wand. With games like Project Zomboid in their unstable states, you're bound to run into bugs and glitches aplenty. I certainly have, as you've seen on many occasions, and that's where Wand can help. Wand allows me to open the game and debug with just one simple click, meaning I can fix irksome bugs with zero fuss through this extremely simple to use desktop app. Wand has over 3,500 different supported games with a variety of functions. Games like RimWorld, Abiotic Factor, Vampire Survivors, even Factorio, and across these games, Wand provides even more utility. For a game like Vampire Survivors, I have a full game guide at the tip of my fingers. All I have to do is press Alt+W to access the in-game overlay and get all the assistance immediately. And I can even add modifiers and bonuses to experience the game in ways I never have before, like having guaranteed god chests every time, or playing with a character on super speed. I recently played through the new game Dispatch, but there's no function in the game to fast forward on second playthroughs. Well, Wand fixed that with a single hotgearable fast forward button that saved me hours of rewatching scenes. This is an amazing tool to experience all your favorite single player games in unique and exciting ways, and it's been something I've used for a while personally to enhance my gaming adventures and assist with any issues I find along the way. The desktop app and overlay is clear, easy to use, and automatically identifies any games in my library. Download Wand for free by visiting wand.gg/Kezza or just tap the link in the description. And up until December 1st, Wand is offering 25% off their annual Pro subscription. This is the lowest price they offer all year and the best time to unlock the full Wand experience. Use the promo code WANDBA BF25. Thanks again to Wand for sponsoring this video. By the way, long-time viewers, do you see how impressive this table storage setup is? Look, I'm actually placing stuff neatly. I don't even feel like myself anymore. And I got a comfy new quilt for my bed and a little star pillow. This was a cozy little shithole in the ground. The next day, I returned to the army surplus, first looting anything I missed on the first run, and then returning to my pack opening. Armed with my throwaway melee weapons, I began battering the door down. It took a little while, but it was a job well done. And after dealing with a couple of wayward zombies, I started opening crates and cabinets.
All right, let's see if we can't find some big firepower in here.
Of all the great finds, the key ones for my journey forward were the M14 rifle and the hatchets. Like most high IQ Project Zomboid players, I know that axes are far superior to any other weapon, spears and crowbars included. And if you disagree with me, make sure to leave a hateful comment so I feel the deep repercussions of my own words and actions. There's nothing like hate comments to solidify the deep feeling of dissatisfaction I carry with me each and every day. Having loaded the supermarket cart to the brim, I was gonna head home before I realized that this van in the corner actually had a key in it also. So instead of taking the cart back, I loaded it into the trunk of the van. This van would effectively be my first vehicle. I got it up and running with some gas I'd filled up in a bottle, picked up a trailer from the diner earlier, and did a few looting runs of the remaining stuff within the nearby buildings. Even this garage that I'd missed earlier, which had a small fridge I'd be able to install in my bunker. All that I'd need to do is then drive this van through, well, a forest. I don't know why I thought this would work, but it was pretty miserable, to say the least.
Okay.
So with that nightmare over, let's take stock on our list of goals. We officially had a vehicle, food, and meds. Water was a work in progress that I'm sure we could manage over time, but there were two big goals left, one of which would certainly be, as always, a bit more challenging. In order to get power to this bunker after the water shuts off, I would need to know how to power the generator that came with it. Normally, finding a generator magazine is one of those things you just try and knock out as you go, but in this case, it was the next one on the chopping block. I was gonna have to try and fast track it to get our bunker up to snuff. That would mean planning our first larger trip outside of this area, since I wasn't lucky enough to find one up to this point. Now, truth be told, this van wasn't in the best shape, so after doing some looting, I spent time trying to level up my electrical skills, which was easy enough with some nearby computers and the clocks in each building. The big goal here was to get enough experience in both of these skills to, you guessed it, hotwire. And after spending a solid day in combination with the books I'd acquired so far from my looting, I was hotwire ready. Hotwire capable, hotwire handy, which brings me all the way back to this ute or truck. I don't know whatever you want to call this, but where I come from, it's a ute, all right? With this thing hotwired, I moved the trailer across to it and drove it back to my bunker. And I definitely didn't get stuck in my poorly made path and have to cut it out. With my storage capacity now well and truly surpassed by my storage requirements, I placed down some crates that I'd picked up from the army surplus, filling them up quickly. Now we could start cooking on our generator magazine plan. Having not found one so far, my first plan was to get to the nearest bookstore. Unpacking our larger area, the nearest bookstore was in this small town a few miles down the road. Having never visited it before, I had no idea how congested it would be. And then you have to account for the new heat maps and things could get pretty cagey pretty quickly. But equipped with a decent supply of weapons, I was confident I could take down any issues in my way, even if I was, frankly, a little rusty.
I don't really know what to expect in this town. I don't think I've ever been here, ever, so it could be absolute chaos. We're just going to play it safe and I'll definitely not get hurt, probably, maybe.
So this goal would initially seem like a pretty simple one, although truth be told, I don't know if a generator magazine will be within this bookstore. I could only hope. But such was the nature of Build 42 that plans like this could quickly spiral. What started as a simple looting run in one little shop would become a battlefield. The more and more zombies I took out, the more that appeared. I cleared the first group, but decided I wanted to return to the car, and it wasn't a plan I thought through well at all.
That's not good. That is not good.
Bruh. You really can't be overconfident in Project Zomboid. You take enough time off and you make sloppy mistakes like that. Fortunately, it wasn't a bite, so I'd hopefully escape this one unscathed in the long run, but I did need a rest for a while and recover my energy in a nearby field. Then I headed back across, opting to go for a strategy that would save on energy and time. Now, if I'm being completely honest, this was a plan fueled by one thing. They had just released ragdolls at the time, and so I kind of just wanted to f around and find out. And it was a fun idea, if nothing else. I slammed into zombie after zombie, having the time of my life. It was a little cagey pumping my way over all these corpses, but there was a tangible bump of feedback with each new one added to the pile. It was addicting. Unfortunately, there's a reason this is a dangerous strategy in the game, especially with a trailer attached.
That's fully upside down. That is I'm not getting that out. Oh no. Oh, I don't even know I don't know if I can flip the trailer, but I might be cooked here. I would have to shove it back over. Oh man, good things never last.
Yeah, I kind of the proverbial bet on that one, but you live and learn, and we had fun, right? For now, because of my transgressions, I was forced to fight this one on the ground once again, leading away zombies and using the nearby fence to trip them for an easy kill. This was a time-consuming process, but eventually, after being exceptionally patient, I made my way through and was finally able to enter the store. A hard-earned victory that would pay off perfectly without issue.
Yeah, that's pretty on brand. Oh, dude, I'm gonna go for the books. Alright. This is a bad idea. This is a bad idea. This is a really bad idea.
At this point, I was becoming more and more familiar with stuff going terribly wrong, but I had to risk looking inside to see if there was a generator magazine to be found, and to try and funnel out as much as I could. This was quite frankly a terrible idea, but as more and more things go wrong, you start to become desensitized to them. Fortunately, I somewhat made it out, dumping my cart full of books in a driveway nearby and quickly shuffling into the car. I could come back for the cart, but I wouldn't want to be running around without a vehicle. I pummeled through a few undead on the road and parked the car nearby. Believing that there was no generator magazine within the bookstore, I'd have to pivot. I needed this magazine if I was going to survive past the power outage. That was the crux of this situation. But at the same time, there were still some books inside that might be useful. It was just that the hour was getting later and I was running out of juice. I ran around trying to figure out an opportune moment to reacquire my supermarket cart. It was at first ineffective, but if you're patient enough, you'll eventually find an opening. After a few minutes, I found exactly that, running through to grab the cart and lugging it back to the ute. This was by no means smart, but it was the decision making of a man who had gotten really a little tired of this. Despite all of the terrible tragedies along the way, I was finally out. Freedom from the surprising horde that lurked around this bookstore. So this wasn't ideal, but I had acquired a bunch of literature at the cost of one injury. In terms of our goals, we still needed the generator magazine to get power up and running. And like I'd mentioned, water was something we'd probably find in a water cooler at one point or another. Our tool stocks were getting there, but we were missing some key tools before we could check this one off too. I checked a few of the nearby houses, hoping for some kind of exceptionally lucky magazine spawn, but no luck on that one either. After returning home and dropping off my loot, I mulled over my options.
I still feel like there's probably books in there that I need. Like, I only checked maybe half of them, and my injury's like mostly healed up now, so I think we should go back.
So initially I was gonna double, triple, quadruple check the bookstore. Given how many hoops I would need to jump through to go beyond this bookstore, making sure that I hadn't missed the magazine would be a worthwhile trip. And given that I'd already drawn enough attention with the alarm, I figured I might as well go loud. So with the bookstore now cleared, I checked for a second time, without an alarm in my ear, and no magazine. That meant things would have to get a little bit more interesting. So before doing anything, I found a nearby ute the same as my own and decided to do the old switcheroo. A new ute would mean a lot more durability, given how much damage I caused when slamming into the undead the day prior. I returned home to my bunker and deposited what I collected, returning to the town the same day and looting a nearby farming store. Truthfully, there wasn't a lot of stuff I needed, but it helped me collect some of the tools I was missing, and there was, you guessed it, more ammo in here. Plus, I got some farming and fishing supplies in case I wanted some more long-term sustenance plans. I was now on the path to checking more places for a generator magazine, but looting these high-value locations along the way was kind of a no-brainer. It helped me check off my other goals in the process, making this generator magazine the final part of my journey. Knowing any trip further out would be easier from here, I decided to stay one night in the town itself, heading to a house on the outskirts and holding up for a good night's sleep. Then in the morning, I hit another high-value location in a tool shop a bit further down the road. There were a fair few undead around and inside the building, but with a machete I'd acquired in the army surplus, it was simple enough work. Fortunately, this tool store was pretty stocked up, and I managed to get my hands on what I'd call the last key tool for my journeys ahead, a sledgehammer. That meant I could finally check off tools on my list for a successful base, which certainly made these little side trips worth the time. Since all this looting had occupied a decent chunk of the day, I checked some nearby houses once again, hoping for a bit of a lucky break in search for this magazine. But after having no luck, I slept in my car for the night, given that I was extremely drowsy. Unfortunately, in the morning, I'd have to return to the bunker. Don't get me wrong, I loved my little home, but I was aware that any time I headed headed back, it was a long drive back out. But at this point, my ute storage was way too full to continue. So I returned, unloading a heap of loot, and finally took some time to do some base improvements before my last, well, hopefully last big trip. A full redesign wasn't in the plans just yet, and frankly, there's only so much you can do with a tiny space like this. But as you can see, I now had a television that I'd acquired on my travels, allowing me to watch some shows and acquire skills. And since I was so close to being able to craft my own crates, I headed outside and laid out the wall frames for some future walls. I don't know what the plan was here, but I did it anyway for the skill levels. With those skills, I was finally able to build some new crates, with more space than the ones I'd acquired from the army surplus. So I shifted out the old and in with the new, building new crates in the entry space and funneling my loot into separate chests based on their category. Normally I'd throw everything on the floor, but to do so in a space this tiny would feel a bit egregious even for me. And if you hadn't noticed, I'd also acquired a water cooler, giving me a decent supply of water to get me through the first few weeks. That meant we can actually check water off our list. So after all was said and done, I was firmly locked onto the now final goal for this adventure, to acquire the mythical magazine and get power set up for my long-term survival in this adventure.
I feel a deep sense of concern that this generator magazine is going to be impossible to find. And it's a real problem because, like, well, it's not really a problem. I mean, we could grind the electrical, but I'm super lazy and I don't want to do that. And so I'm kind of just hoping I'll find the magazine. But if history is anything to go by, that might not be the case. But first, we'll try some more places. We'll head Riverside way.
My first stop was the school in Riverside. This was a pretty simple run in and out, since for some reason it wasn't too congested inside. But by no surprise, based on my luck at this point, there was no generator magazine. This was becoming a running thing. I did nab every book that I hadn't seen in my travels yet to add to my collection, but my search would have to continue. So as to be expected, my search would become progressively more and more dangerous the further I had to travel. The next option was a bookstore on the main street of Riverside. At first it seemed like this would be a pretty quiet area. These spaces can often be deceiving because of how many zombies would hide inside the buildings. I pulled up out front of the bookshop and started swinging, but fortunately there wasn't too many in my vicinity, so clearing the undead was pretty achievable. Heading inside, I knew I was due some luck. This was now my third location in search of this magazine. I knew if this bookstore failed, things would start to get challenging, and as I'm sure would be no surprise to you at this point, no generator magazine. This was a situation I'd encountered before. This magazine being so essential to progression in terms of setting up power made it a pretty essential find. But after checking through 3 bookstores, I feared the luck was just not on my side. So like any comfortable survivor, I would have to make some tough decisions. I could traverse to the next bookstore on the path or admit defeat and grind through the electrical skill requirements to learn the skill natively. And at this point I decided the latter was the right choice. In surviving the apocalypse, sometimes a certain but uncomfortable truth is better than an uncertain possibility. But my adventure was not over yet, because my run through Riverside would uncover at least a small compensation for the troubles I'd been through up to this point.
I could be wrong, but I believe I just saw a disgustingly juicy vehicular machine in the police station car park. Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna need to get that. That's gonna need to be mine, I think.
I admit, in all my travels, I have never driven a vehicle quite like the one I spotted across the road. But I couldn't get ahead of myself. There were a bunch of zombies in this area, and I still wanted to quickly check the service station here for the off chance I might find a generator magazine. And this quick stop turned into all-out war. With the area for the most part now cleared, I could cross the road and acquire the behemoth that awaited, my consolation prize. And this monster was in great shape. Not only did it have space for me to fit all of my loot, but the car parts themselves were in great condition. With my new partner on this adventure acquired, I headed to a nearby house in Riverside to hole up for the night. The next day I headed in the direction of home, but on the way I made the strange decision to redirect to Rosewood. Because what kind of man would I be if I gave up? What would that make me? If I was the kind of person to fight so hard in this search for the holy magazine, that would make me weak. No, just one more bookstore. I could do this. And this bookstore would finally be the one to break the drought, to set me free. Anyway, the Rosewood bookstore didn't have the magazine either. So yeah, I pretty much just brute forced it. Working my way through houses, grocery stores, travel agents, barber shops, disassembling every single electrical device I could see. It took some time, but at this point it didn't even begin to compare to my magazine search. Finally, after hours and hours of work, inside the Rosewood police station of all places, I disassembled the final light I needed and acquired the level I was after. It was a relief. finally having accomplished what I desired for so long. Since I had already come this far and I'd managed to get a police station key from a zombie I'd taken out earlier, I headed into the back room and took what ammo and weapons I felt would come in handy, stuffing them into my new moving machine, filling it to the brim. It was loaded with books, weapons, ammunition, food, water, stuff that I collected across this massive journey. And finally, after so long, it was time to return home. It was a long trip, but a satisfying one. I reached the bunker in the early hours of the morning and called it a night. And in the morning, I unloaded my belongings and loot. After this adventure, I had finally checked off the last item on my list. I had a generator connected and powered. That meant that this bunker was exactly what I needed it to be. A safe base in this undead world. But the truth is, a base like this is only so good when you're lacking the one thing you really miss. Some friends along the way. Yeah, I think it's about time I get back to that, huh?